Welcome everyone. My name is Jacob Troggett. I am the Board of Governor representing part-time faculty in Northern California for FACC, as well as the chair of the Part-Time Faculty Committee. Every year, the Part-Time Faculty Committee puts together this symposium designed specifically to address the needs of part-time faculty across the state. But of course, this year, our topic is the one-tier system or the unified faculty model, which means we're going to be talking about something that also impacts student interests and our full-time faculty allies. So if that is you, we're also glad to have you here this year. Now, the FACC Part-Time Committee has put a labor of love into this event for the last 6 months, and I'm very grateful to them for the expertise and the tremendous amount of time that's gone into that. Thank you very much to all of them who are here. For those of you who may be new to FACC, FACC's mission is to inform, educate, empower, and advocate for faculty in service to students and the communities of California. Now, before I introduce our esteemed panel, and then someone to introduce our esteemed moderator, I would like to thank one more group of people, which is FACC's incredible staff. This event would not have been possible without them. Thank you, Anna Matthews. Thank you, Ashley Hamilton. Thank you, Erlam Lee, especially. And more than anyone, thank you, Lydia Stoyan, without whom FACC would cease to operate. Just a truly remarkable human being. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panel. We have 8 panelists, a truly massive panel for you of incredible people. Please welcome Kevin Powers. Kevin is a legislative consultant for the Assembly, the California State Assembly Higher Education Committee. We have Joseph Awad, a brilliant student trustee of Mount St. Jacinto Community College District. We have John Gofsky, one of FACC's own governors, as well as a vice president at CFT, and a member of and co-chair of the CFT One-Tier Task Force. We welcome Peter Morse, another person chairing our retirement committee at FACC and a member of the Santa Monica Faculty Association as their president. We have Maria Jose Zeldon Perez as the ASCCC part-time committee chair, my counterpoint in the ASCCC, and an incredible full-time faculty ally to part-timers, having been part-time for a long time herself. We have Anna Matthews, FACC's advocacy manager and a brilliant human being. We have Scott Douglas, who is a representative of CPFA, I believe their Southern Regional Representative, and a brilliant mind. And we are very privileged to have the Vice President of this Vancouver Community College Faculty Association, Frank Costco, who's done quite a lot for One-Tier. Beyond that, I would like to introduce someone who is going to introduce our moderator. I would like to be the first person to introduce President-elect, as well as the current Vice President of FACC, Oronit Limonant Prasert. Welcome, Oronit. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone. Thank you so much for attending this event. And I have to tell you that it is a great honor for me to introduce our former FACC president and the moderator for this event, or the lead for this event. Her name is Dr. Debbie Klein. And Debbie is such a humble person that she wanted to make sure that we have enough time for the panelists to give their input and participate in the discussion. So I'm going to limit my introductions to less than 7 minutes. Debbie is a professor of anthropology at Gavilan College and the past president of FACC. And her research area, my goodness, is extensive, but mostly, includes the relationship between culture and power, globalization, political economy, popular culture, social justice, performance, decolonization, and so forth, so on. But the most important ones, in my opinion, that are related and relevant to this event are the following, and I would really encourage you to read them when you have a chance. She wrote a paper, a scholarly paper, research-based, title, A Unified Faculty Model, the Remedy for Decades of Failed Education, Reformed, in quotation marks, reformed, in the California community colleges. That one has not been published yet. She also wrote a paper on the part-time equity issue that was published in the FACCC magazine in spring 2020. I cannot thank Debbie enough for all the advocacy work that she's done. Her research, it's just incredibly thorough and inspiring. And I really enjoyed working with her. And please join me in welcoming Debbie in a minute. But before that, I would also like to encourage everyone here who might not have joined FACCC, that you can play a big role in what we do in supporting supporting our advocacy. So I am going to put the FACCC membership link in the chat very soon. Hopefully, if you're not a member, after this symposium, you will see the value of being a FACCC member for a big cause like this. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you so much, Orani, and welcome to everyone here. It's so great to see so many old friends and new faces, and it's such an honor to be here. And thank you so much, Orani, for such a warm introduction. It is my true honor to be here in service to our movement toward a unified, one-tiered faculty in the California community colleges. This is it. This is why we're here. It's an organizing meeting as well as information. So happy to be here. Just a little note about how things will go for the next hour. I'll be asking the questions generated by our amazing FACCC part-time committee. Jacob, the chair, and I met yesterday, and we came up with a few panelists that I'll toss the question to initially, but the panelists don't know who you are yet. So if I mention your name and you'd prefer to pass, that's completely fine. We have such a large esteemed panel, as you all know. So, and we will only go to 3:05. So if you could all please keep your comments relatively brief, then that would give the other panelists a chance to respond also. Thank you all so much for being here today. So to kick things off, we will go to Frank Costco. And Frank, if I could please ask you to give a brief description of the one-tiered system at Vancouver Community College.
Well, thank you, Debbie, and thanks for the invitation to be here. I've sent a document. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Jacob, and others. You guys have a great organization, structure behind that gets things going like this. Highlight points here, and then hopefully that will spark some questions. I come at this question. It's so. I've been through my professional TESOL organization. I ran into many Americans in TESOL who were working on this issue 20 years ago. A little over 20 years ago, we had the International Convention in Vancouver, and I ran into them there. And they were the ones, especially Jack Longmate, who were responsible for pushing me in front of folks in the States. And people seem to like hearing about our system, which is it's not a perfect one-tier system, but it's very close to an operative. Well, it's a very good one-tier system. There are shortfalls, which I can point out, but it is very good. I think the observing, and this is true in Canada too, that this discrimination between the different tiers in post-secondary is a real crisis, is an existential crisis. that needs to be addressed. And it's, as far as I can tell, your group and the I never get these initials right, CFT, working on this one tier in such a formal way is a really, really positive step. And doing that, taking on that huge responsibility, failure is not an option. Because, this, from my outsider's point of view, it's the first time in about 20 years I've seen such a major move by a major organization. Now, I'm not complete, I don't claim to have a comprehensive knowledge of things, but in my little bit of bumping into people on the West Coast, this is the first real comprehensive move, and it's so important. And like I said, failure is not an option. This has to move forward. This crisis has to end. I come at it, and you'll hear this from a union point of view, a bargaining point of view. And for me, unions are instruments of social and economic justice, and they have a responsibility to move social and economic justice agendas forward. And this one has been right at the heart of the organizations for decades and hasn't gotten the proper attention it deserves. But those are my initial comments. I'll just run through some of the features of this because some of you may be familiar with this, even seen this before. And I won't spend a lot of time in detail, but in our collective agreement from day one, people are paid on a one pay scale with 11 steps. You can see at the second bullet there. Right now, our top step is about 113,000 Canadian. Our weighted average is over 100,000. There's absolute pay equity for everybody, even if you're the sub on your first day for 3 hours. I always joke that you get a little bit of Christmas in your pay because the pay is prorated to include all the vacation, 44 days of vacation pay and statutory holidays for a first day sub. So it's completely pro rata. And there's essentially one hiring per career. And after that, you move up in your time status and your security status. And we have one academic freedom provision in our collective agreement, which applies to everybody. That first day sub for 3 hours and a seasoned regular, we call them, who's been around 20 years. It's the same academic freedom provision for everybody. We have complete membership in the union. Everybody pays dues at 2.15%. You accrue, this one is important, in that second cluster, the fourth bullet there, accruing the right of first refusal after you reach 120 cumulative days. Your department heads and deans have to consider you in seniority order for your next gig, shall we say. You get seniority with your first contract, and contracts are mandatory for any assignment over 3 days. You accrue pension vesting. It's also important that your workload is pro rata. If your department has what you might call service duty or meeting time, then if you're a 1/3 instructor, you get 1/3 of that provision. So your scheduling is all pro rata as well. It's very important for most of our members can bear children, and the status and seniority maintenance while on maternity and paternity leaves, even if you've only just started at the college, exists, and that's really important. It doesn't depend on your job status. And then given maintenance of half-time status, and here's where one area we're not perfect. We haven't got this below half-time. but a person will accrue extended health benefits, dental benefits, paid sick leave. The government in our province, British Columbia, has given everybody 5 days. We have paid sick leave on top of that minimum of 5 days. And you can accrue short and long-term disability. And very important, you can accrue PD time with funding. So if you want to go to a conference in California, you can come down to California for a conference. And then this one is very important. After this half-time has been maintained for a couple of years and you haven't got a negative eval, you're automatically what we call regularized. And that means in the next cluster, you can see protection of your status, no further evaluations without cause. You have the right to take leave, you get seniority while you're on leave, education leave, etc. And you actually get the maternity and paternity leave, but you also get a stipend with that as well. And you get a suite of layoff protections, notice, recall, or severance rights. And at the end of your career, there's a transition to retirement provisions as well. All of this works together. You know, our British Columbia laws are different than yours, but it works together with some of the labor laws in BC and other laws. But also some of the provisions, like we rotate our department heads. So that's good for the health of the department. Anybody can, sometimes a term instructor will run for department head and then they're automatically regularized. And that's happened. It actually happened for me at one time. I became a coordinator and then was full-time regular after that. We have a no overtime clause, which is, I know in some places that's controversial, but, and we have the automatic regularization, as I mentioned. So there's not this huge differential between regular pay and what we call term instructor pay. It's actually the same pay. So money is taken out of the issue when it comes from an HR point of view about this. They don't like regularization because it reduces their flexibility. You know, they love to lay off people when they feel they need to lay off people. And they can do that with term instructors usually at the end of a contract. But the term instructor maintains their right of first refusal for up to 2 years, according to their seniority. So usually people come back in. And I'll stop there because I can go on and it gets complicated.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was amazing. And I want to just refer folks who are here who may not know that Frank did a much longer presentation for the CFT Council for Community Colleges. And John Gofsky has a link to that. Maybe, John, you could drop that in the chat if it's not already there. But it's also linked to the papers that I've written. But I just watched it. I've watched it a few times, Frank, and that's such a gift to us because you really take some time to go through all of this in more detail. And then you had some Q&A. So thanks so much. So moving on to the next question, which is for you, John. And that is the California Federation of Teachers has been working on this transition from to a one-tiered system for years now. John, would you please tell us about CFT's progress and where CFT is at now?
Okay, well, thanks, Debbie. And thank you, Frank. Wow, there's a lot here. So as Frank said, this idea has been bounced around for many years. There's been a lot of discussion about the one-tier system that is in use in Vancouver. I've been an advocate for contingent faculty within the CFT and other organizations for at least 20 years now. And there's been a lot of talk about it, but it was really just talk up until, quite frankly, a couple of years ago. And I'll take a little credit because I wrote a resolution to put this in front of the CFT. And that was the spark, I think, to where we are now. Now, you know, many of the people in this room have worked on this issue for many years, so I can't like say, hey, it was all me. But building on the work that people had done, to popularize the idea and even just make people aware of it, because many faculty still are not even aware of what one tier means or even heard the term yet, So I wrote a resolution that just basically said CFT shall establish a task force with the charge of developing a strategic plan to transition our current community college system into a one-tier system similar to that in use in Vancouver. Essentially, it said that. It passed overwhelmingly. I don't even think anybody spoke against it. And CFT established a task force. That task force is roughly split between full-time and part-time faculty. And I have to say, at the beginning of the process, we've been meeting over a year now. There were many full-time faculty members were somewhat skeptical of the idea, open to it, but openly skeptical, and had a lot of concerns, as we all do when you're talking about a major shift in the way the system would work. And over the past year and so many months, we've been meeting, and as we've gotten into it, I have noticed that many of the people on the task force who initially were very skeptical are now just a little skeptical. I'd say that the concept is really being embraced, but there are real questions as to how it can be implemented. And that's what we're struggling with, because this task force is not just going to come up with some plan that is going to be put on a shelf. The intention is we are going to come up with a plan, and we are going to adopt this plan, and we are going to move this plan. So we're a little behind schedule, because originally the resolution said this process would be about a year. Well, it's been over a year, and the complexity of this means we'll probably be meeting for quite a while afterwards, after today, to continue on this. But we are making good progress. And as Frank mentioned, there are certain features of a one-tier system that he explained in Vancouver that I think there's general agreement on within our task force and faculty who are not in the task force, and that is some of the central concepts, such as one salary schedule, that all faculty are paid on the same salary schedule, proportionate to load. All faculty have the same duties and responsibilities proportional to load. One hiring process, a path towards what Frank calls regularization, what we would call tenure. So the terminology, as Frank mentioned, in Vancouver, they have term faculty, and those are the new hires who have been there 2 years or less. And then they have term regular faculty, and our term for that would be roughly tenured faculty. So I think there's broad agreement that this bifurcation is ridiculous, and that we need to have this gentle guided pathway from being term faculty to regular, or being, part-time contingent to tenured. I think there's another concept, and this is our system, because our system in California really, through state law, sets up this caste system where the two pieces of the faculty there's no path to go from one to the other. It's a complete separate hiring process, right, to get to the tenured position. But I think when you dissociate tenure from full-time and contingent from part-time, then more things become possible. And part of what I've seen in California is, because our system is so ingrained in our minds of full-time equals tenure, part-time equals contingent, it stops us from really seeing how this could really work. And one of the things I would say to faculty who are new to this idea, dissociate that in your mind. Okay, so once you pull apart load from status, many more things become possible. And as Frank mentioned, you can be regularized at a 50% load. That's not possible in our system today, but that points to some of the changes we need to make. So I think there's broad agreement on some of these concepts. There are details that our task force is still working out.
John, I'm gonna
I'll
ask you
stop.
to put a pause there, but you'll have a chance to hopefully
No
come
problem.
back.
Thank you,
And,
Deb.
no, that's so brilliant. Thank you so much for that overview. Moving on, this question is about students, and we had Joseph, Anna, and Maria Jose in mind for this question. So inequity lives in this imbalanced employment system, as we've been discussing. Without fixing this, there can be no equity for students in the California community colleges. how are students being disserviced by a two-tiered system? How will a one-tiered system improve student success? And so anyone can go ahead and jump in, please.
I'd love to take this one. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so most of what I've done during my term is trying to convince administrators that a lot of the part-time faculty issues are not exclusive to bargaining tables and the unions. There's a lot of intersectionality when it comes to students. And I think again, an example where you could really see this well would be office hours. And I feel so passionate about this. If you look across the state, most of our colleges do not give the same number of office hours proportionally to part-time faculty and full-time faculty. And when I was doing research about this for a resolution for the Student Senate, Debbie, your EdSource article for how much we are over relying on part-time faculty, there's this problem is so widespread. So I guess from a student point of view, I don't care necessarily if my professor is working 5 days a week or 2 days a week. I expect the same quality and level of education. I want consistency, and I think our districts are really depriving students of that. So I think I hope that students, as we continue to collectively voice our issues, that we would band together with faculty, because I know it's not just a FACC slogan, but faculty working conditions are student learning conditions, and I live it. If most of our students are from disenfranchised backgrounds, if most of us are first generation students, and there's a lot of academic literature that ties in how office hour access is directly tied to academic success and student learning outcomes. What are our districts doing exactly? So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I can go ahead and jump in next. 100% agree with Joseph that faculty working conditions are student learning conditions. And, I was in the community college system not too long ago. One of the things that FACC prides herself on is that every single member of our staff has been to community college, and we really understand these issues on a personal level. I am a product of the California community colleges, and I'm only where I am in life because I had faculty who had the bandwidth and were not exploited by the system because they were full-time faculty to invest in me, engage in my education and my success in and out of the classroom, right? Because I had full-time faculty who had that bandwidth and had that support from their institution, I was able to, get a paper published while I was in community college. We were able to attend conferences. They're putting on a study abroad program to take our political science students to Italy to learn about government and stuff of that sort there. These are the kinds of experiences that enable community colleges to be the magical institutions that they are and provide students with really a second chance at life, I feel like. And so long as our contingent faculty are exploited, that's not going to work, right? And students deserve better at the end of the day. I remember when I transitioned into this role at FACC, and I was learning about all these issues, I read an article in which one of my former professors was cited. I had no idea at the time that she was a part-time faculty, and hearing about her story of not being able to make rent and really make ends meet while working at 4 different colleges really broke my heart, right? And from my student experience, you'd see a part-time faculty just the same as you would a full-time faculty, and our districts need to get on board with that.
Thank you so much. I love hearing from the students. I think it's so much more, and thank you for bringing up the office hours, but really we think in terms of what is requested of us, or those of us that really believe in equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, anti-racism, is very important that we recognize that we're not really just teachers anymore. We're not asked to just be in the classroom with our students. For us to be able to truly serve them in an equitable manner, we are institutional agents. So that's what faculty is. Whether we're part-time or full-time, we're required to do much more than that to be able to truly serve the students and meet them where they are. So for me, the injustice is, of course, if you have a full-time job, you have the opportunity to be on campus all day, every day. You have the opportunity to learn about student services. That technically, how are you supposed to know when you're just hired to go in and out for 2 hours to one place, 3 hours in another place? When we are supposed to know these things so we can guide the students through the process, because their learning doesn't happen just in the classroom. It happens in the institution, with the environment, the culture, the services provided to them. So to me, it's so important that we're not seeing this piece. I would argue that this is actually even more important than what happens in the classroom. It's a holistic approach into serving students, and how our part-timers giving or encourage the opportunity to do all this work when they're treated as is they are not as important. And I would argue that a lot of my part-time faculty, and I used to be one, I was a part-timer for 14 years, and I would argue I worked full-time, but I was only recognized as a part-time. But I did everything and more, as I know that most of you do. So which means it's a labor of love, but it is unpaid at the end of the day. And that's where the injustice truly, truly happens, because I know that most of part-timers actually do the same amount of work or even more, but they're really not being recognized and not being given the opportunity. So there is an absolute mistreatment in terms of how we, even full-time administration, everyone in between, in the perception of the value of our part-time colleagues. And that is why I'm here, wanting to make a change. Yes.
Thank you all so much. I'm tempted to open it up to the rest of the panel, but in the interest of time, I'll just move on to the rest of the questions, and we can come back to this really important question, since it is the question about serving our students, which is why we're all here. So I will move on to the next question. We had Scott, Anna, and Frank in mind for this one. What differences or difficulties do you see in implementing a one-tiered system in California compared with Canada? I'll go ahead and toss that to Scott, since we haven't heard from you, Scott, yet, if you want.
Sure. So it's a complicated question, I think, and it's kind of difficult to specifically speak to what's going on in Canada. We can talk about Vancouver, but I think Vancouver is also somewhat unique in Canada. And I think what we really need to do is cast this in the context of not just what's going on in California community colleges, but what's going on nationwide, even internationally. And I think that the entire system is predicated on a mental move, witting or otherwise, away from education as a fully funded public good towards education is something that we want to get done as effectively as we can and efficiently as we can on the cheap. And unfortunately, that's a real tough situation to overcome. But in order to effectively accomplish our ultimate ideal end goal, that's exactly what we have to overcome. I wish I had a silver bullet or a magic wand, but I really think that that's the key thing to figure out. It's not that it's too expensive. It's that there's not enough prioritization of our resources towards this goal. I mean, we've got a state that has sent $200 million for healthcare and has spent so far about $20 million. What's up with that? The money can be had. It's just a matter of recasting our goals and our priorities. Now, I know I'm maybe not directly addressing that specific question, but I think that's really the issue. And I think it's international, and it's not really just education, but we're certainly seeing maybe the most exacerbated results of that mentality. I see John nodding his head. I know he wants to get in here and add to this, but that's my comment for what it's worth.
Thank you so much, Scott. Beautifully said. Anna, I saw you first. Did you want to jump in here, or I know John does too. So
I'm gonna let John go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, I just want to echo what Scott said. We are doing education on the cheap. And, we've had these different foundations, Gates, Lumina, trying to say, oh, the solution is more technology and more efficiency, get them in, get them out, measured outcomes. It's all about, moving through the system efficiently. And we have to attack that idea pretty much head on, because we do need to stop disinvestment in public education. That's at the root of a lot of this, is that we're not funding education properly across the board, but especially in higher ed and especially in community colleges. And in California, when you look at the 3 higher ed systems, the community college spending per student is really way off and not enough. And so we do have, to get to that original question, some of the obstacles are going to be financial, fiscal questions, and we can't dodge that. And part of the complexity is that the funding system in California, our community college funding is kind of tied proportionally to K-12 funding. So what we need to do is not upset the apple cart for K-12 funding. We do not want to do that, but we do need to kind of look at why that ratio is the way it is and change it a little bit in a way that doesn't hurt K-12. That's going to be a big challenge.
Thanks, John.
And Anna, did you want to go next? I wanted a quick comment, but go ahead.
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in. I think John's point is well taken. I feel like we've tried everything in the book to improve student success rates, and not many of them have worked or demonstrated like really great outcomes. But we haven't actually tried investing in our faculty, who are the ones who really do drive student success. I think implementation for this is obviously going to be difficult. This would be overhauling our system, but I think we need to focus on the principle, which is that this system is unacceptable and it doesn't work. And we wouldn't accept this sort of exploitation, like in this era where we're trying to make labor gains across the board. We wouldn't accept this anywhere else. So why are we accepting it with education when education is what drives socioeconomic mobility, and really our next generation of students is our next generation of citizens. So we need to invest in that more. Certainly from the legislative standpoint, I think that is a huge implementation barrier. I do think because we have, 73 different districts, we are a very disjointed system. Unfortunately, some level of legislative change is going to need to happen to sort of unify things. And this current legislature and certainly current governor have not been very supportive of us moving forward in part-time issues, even though we've been taking a pretty piecemeal approach. So I certainly think that is going to be an obstacle we're going to need to figure out how to overcome to make this happen.
If I could, thanks. I just, one comment I wanted to make is, I was reflecting on this from our BC context. And we have some really small units, like 100 people or faculty, or one group even has less than 100. But they were able to get many of the main features of our system because and again, I'm coming at this from a union bargaining point of view. We used our union bargaining power, and we were not afraid to take strike votes when needed to mobilize that. And I speak from ignorance, of course, about your California system, but I think there needs to be perhaps more of a mobilization of that power as well, to go hand in hand with your very skilled advocacy on policy and legislation. I think you need labor advocacy, which comes with the ability to take job action ultimately. And I'm not saying, oh yeah, we can do that tomorrow, but you can build up to that. You start a defense fund, for example. And why do you have a defense fund? Well, we might need it someday. And you start training your members about what job action can mean. It doesn't mean all out strikes. And then different ways to bargain. We formed in BC and in Quebec, they do the same thing, kind of common fronts, where this multiplicity of unions got together on a few key issues and put their differences aside and came together to focus their power on certain key issues. And like I said at the beginning, I can't think of a more key issue than this great injustice at the heart of your great system.
Thank you all so much. Coalition building, right? I mean, this is what we are here for today. But thank you all so much. I'm going to just move on. And this next question, Peter, since you haven't spoken yet, we kind of had you in mind here and whoever else, but here it is. We recently saw the success of bringing part-time healthcare funded by the state to all part-time faculty which is slow in taking off because of how individual districts are structuring it. And Scott, you just mentioned this, so we had you in mind for this as well. If we implement a one-tiered system, what would be the best path to a more unified implementation going through the districts or management?
Thank you, Debbie. I just want to remind folks, right, so I'm the president union of the union at Santa Monica College, and I want to amplify Frank's words in the moment ago about union power is, I think, underutilized at the moment. And even if we may not be able to strike, we can work to contract. There are many things, right, that part-time faculty, we know that they care about students, and you do everything you need to do to help those students succeed. Sometimes you have to stop. And, you know, we've had a number of actions where we've implemented that to say, you know, they're not paying you for this, you must not do this, right? It's the only way this can get, for example, office hours. We did this for office hours throughout the whole year. They wouldn't pay for office hours in intersessions. And we said, well, then, you know, we're going to tell our students we're very sorry at the end of every class. Here's the card to contact the Vice President of Academic Affairs and let them know that you know, your educational future is being put in peril because of the lack of access to faculty members. So things like that. So I'm going to get back to your question, though. The health insurance piece, I think, is actually a really good example of how complicated, with the size of our system, making real progress. So I think the one point I wanted to get across, no matter what the question was, is that your unions have to be at the front of saying, we will not accept anything less than pay parity for assignments that you might receive. We will not accept anything less than office hour parity. We'll work for health insurance parity. And John Kovsky's like a rock star, honestly, as far as advocating for these things. And anyone who's seen him and knows what he's done, you know, pay for simple things, pay for being on your academic senate. It has to be part of your process. It has to be something that your faculty group, and the Senate has to be a partner in this, as well as the unions. You have to be on the same page to say, we'll not accept anything less. And here are the reasons. And the students were eloquent just a moment ago, right? Many times, students have no idea the status that we have of a particular faculty member. They just know what they're getting from the faculty member in the moment. I'm trying to get back to there, that, you know, we've worked locally. We are an independent union, so we have some flexibility in ways I think that perhaps some other locals may not have. But I still think on everybody's individual campus, you have to say, we're going to make this a priority that everybody's paid the same, everybody's in the pieces that you can. And we see it as, if you want to get the camel into the tent, you have to get its nose under the edge first, and you have to do it piece by piece. And it took us a long time to get what we truly believe is full pay equity for the assignment that you've received. Our next thing is we need full pay equity as far as the quote unquote ancillary work that folks do. That's the next piece. And so you have to either take it off at a chunk at a time. And as more college, my last comment, the more colleges that have this kind of equity across different parts of the contract will make it easier at a state level, I believe, to say, there are so many places that are already doing this. They're close. You know, why can't we move it forward that way? It's the idea of the regularization and getting job security for less than the quote unquote 100% load. That's a really brilliant idea. But a part-time colleague of mine just recently said, and I'm going to quote him without giving him his name, that it's still rainbows and unicorns until I can make a living, right? And so part of that is the local folks increasing pay. But again, I think that's the hard issue. If somebody has a 50% assignment and they've got the job security, that's wonderful, but are they still able to live, right? How are you cobbling things together? So there's a lot of pieces. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. In terms of implementation, one of the things that we have to fight amongst ourselves is this desire to get it all tomorrow. I would love to get it all tomorrow. Don't misunderstand me. I mean, wow, right? But it's just not going to happen. And we really need, and I'm so itching to see how John Goffsky's task force, which was tasked to come up with a plan, I'm really itching to see that plan. But anyway, it seems to me that we have to be somewhat pragmatic, and I think probably one of the key steps beyond, as Peter just mentioned, let's make enough money and have a little bit of job security so we can survive while we work on this. But we have to eliminate a discriminatory mandate under California law that oxymoronically requires and mandates that part-time faculty are second-class citizens to be treated as though they are temporary under the law forever. I mean, it makes no sense. I think it's a mistake in the court's interpretation of that law. But we have to go, we have to throw away the legal mandates that prevent movement. And then we can stop and we can look and we can say, what movement can we actually attain? Continue to work on legislative approaches, but now we've got some muscle at the bargaining table to say, look, you can't say you can't do it anymore. And so I think getting rid of that stupid law is probably job one.
Thanks, Scott. So much appreciated. This is actually a great time to bring in, if I may, Kevin, whom I don't think we've heard from yet, on legislation and policy. It's sort of a natural place to go, I think. And our question on that is pretty straightforward, Kevin. And we also had Anna in mind for this. What is to be done to achieve a one-tiered system through policy, through legislation?
Thanks, Debbie. I think that's a great question. I have to say I enjoyed reading over your paper. Noticed it was published March 31st, which may be someone's birthday. I'll say I'm gonna address this a little circuitously. So I've been working for the legislature for 16 years. I spent 8 years with Marty Block, who was chair of the Assembly Higher Ed Committee, and then was in the Senate as a budget sub-chair, and was a real champion for part-time faculty, and then working for Chair Medina for the last 8 years as well, who, the healthcare that we were talking about previously was something that he made a priority. I feel like legislatively is going to be complicated, right? There's lots of moving pieces that's probably going to have to be part of a package. It's going to have to be something that's going to have a coalition behind it. It doesn't necessarily have to have everyone, right? It doesn't have to be something that the chancellor's office or that the individual campuses have to love initially. There has to be a strong group and a diverse group in the sense of like not just labor, not just like it has to be a real coalition behind it, because this is just going to be such a dramatic shift from what's currently there. And I agree, there needs to be a plan. There needs to be the legislative plan that takes a look at things like the faculty obligation number and 7525 under the Vasconcelos bill and 88. All these different things are going to have to be, addressed. And then there needs to be, it has to happen at the bargaining table as well. Part of the reason I think some of these bills, and I'm thinking of like AB 1505 from Rodriguez a couple years ago that looked to rebench the FON. Some of the reasons these things don't make it to the governor's office have to do with a reticence to legislate things that could happen at the bargaining table. And so it's just understanding that not everything is gonna there's a strong feeling that some things are things that should be bargained, and when we try taking big bites, they just don't. That paper airplane doesn't make it through all the rings of fire to the governor's office, right? So there has to be a kind of a multi-pronged, multi-year approach, while working to build a critical mass to kind of push it over the edge.
Thanks so much, Kevin. And did anyone? Oh, Anna, did you want to comment on the policy piece? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think, I 100% agree with what Kevin said about coalition building. I do think that, we need to expand our pool. I know Kevin mentioned labor, but I don't even think we've reached the full extent of collaboration with labor. Why is SEIU not at the table helping us out in this fight, right? This is really a significant labor issue. You would not have it be acceptable in any other field to have, such qualified people working a job where they're exploited and contingent in this way. So we really need to spread the news about this issue and get more collaboration to happen about this. And I really appreciate, I think Janice Warden had dropped a message in the chat talking about the ways in which the legislature has supported these efforts. We've also seen a lot of money actually being contributed towards things like office hours, things like healthcare, but we need to have a conversation about accountability when it comes to districts. And I think that is a part of the conversation that we've been missing. It's something that we're trying to make happen. I know SB 1388, which is a bill that FACCC is co-sponsoring along with CFT and some other folks, tries to push some more accountability. But so long as there is money on the table to make things like part-time healthcare happen and districts are refusing to move forward on that, we're not going to, that the money's already there. If we can't even make that happen because there is this lack of willingness and there's nothing pushing the districts to make them, have to act on what they've been given, we're not going to be able to keep moving the ball forwards. We actually do receive, even though the community colleges are severely underfunded compared to our UC and CSU counterparts, there is a lot of money that we receive that does not get spent the way in which it's supposed to, or sometimes it doesn't even get spent at all, right? And I can envision a drastically different community colleges if we actually used what we were given by the legislature and made good on the things that they've given money for us to do. So I think that is something that is a more immediate sort of a policy thing that I think we need to work on in order to have one tier become reality.
Thank you so much. Go quick, Scott, if I may, and please.
If I may, I want to add one cautionary comment. Kevin very cogently spoke about the provisions or the failed provisions of AB 1725, which was back in 1988. And we found ourselves drifting so far away from anything that can be equitably repaired by fixing the full-time part-time ratio through more hires, by adjusting the fund to make that happen. We have to also be sensitive to the fact that, when people are dying, you need to triage and treat. We can fix the fund. We could turn the fund to 80% tomorrow if we can get that through a bill. But unless we're also sensitive to the fact that you have to transition the current part-time full-timers who are temporarily permanent into those positions in an equitable and reasonable way, you're not really doing justice to those human beings, let alone the system. So I'm very cautionary about big time sweeping fixes that go in that direction, which have proven to fail in the past, but also tend to throw babies out with bathwater.
Thanks, Scott. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
I'm sorry. I just two quick thoughts. One, Scott, I completely agree with what you were saying. There were some comments that spoke to kind of like the fact that like mechanically some of this stuff could be done. Like they don't all need to be in different bills, right? They could be one. It could be one large bill. Yeah, that's kind of not the. I guess that's not what I was trying to say. I think what I was trying to say was there's a lot of different things that would need to be addressed kind of simultaneously. And that can just be a big lift, regardless of if it's one author doing it or several authors carrying companion legislation. And the other thing I was going to say too, when we look, there's what, $150 million that was given toward full-time faculty hiring. And, I think part of the challenge has to be addressing that even after a lot of that money has been spent, there's a million questions. I mean, there was the audit that took a look at this, right? The 2023 audit from the state auditor's office looking at how that money was, how money generally is being spent. And again, to Scott's point that I think it needs to be sort of fundamentally addressed, or we're just going to keep thinking that, oh, we're going to pump money in. Clearly, we're helping part-timers by doing this, right? And the answer is like actually not nearly as much as we think we are. It's not just creating full-time positions that automatically get filled. It's much more complicated than that. So
thank you all. this is a big can of worms, the policy question, and I just wanted to actually ask everyone who's here to please go to a breakout room where we can explore all of these issues in a lot more detail. So we only have a few more minutes, and I wanted to get this question in, and a breakout room is actually about this question as well. And for this one, I had Joseph and Maria Jose in mind, and this is one of the tensions we have seen in extending further benefits to part-time faculty has been regrettable resistance by full-time faculty who see part-time faculty gains as a threat to their own status. What bridges could help unify reluctant full-time faculty so that they do not see part-time faculty gains as take back? And Maria Jose or Joseph or anyone else really who's burning to talk about this.
Well, you know what? I think one of them, it's exposure, is getting people at the table, like really trying to engage more part-timers if we can, to actually be sitting at the table with full-timers, so they actually build some type of relationship. I think a lot of it is because we are kept in kind of silos. Part-time, are not invited, so full-time get to know each other, but we don't really get to know our part-time colleagues. So I think depending on your college, I mean, at least at San Diego City College, we have done a lot of intentional work in terms of not assuming part-time faculty knows that they're invited to all our meetings and all our committees participation, but actually inviting them and making sure that every time we send communication for any committee opportunity, we put right there part-time. This is also for part-time faculty. Part-time faculty, and of course, we work really hard with our union, and we negotiated that part-time faculty are in fact paid for shared governance work. Even though they are paid hourly, still there is inequity there because they don't get paid the same way, but at least there is some type of compensation. And we make sure that every time we send that form out to the district email for faculty, that we make sure that faculty know that they can get paid for participation in shared governance. And I think the more we get together in the same space, the more we can destigmatize or really help some full-timers understand. But I think there is a new wave of full-timers, at least in my experience in my college, understanding the importance of part-timers. I mean, the fact is that 70% of our instructors are part-timers, and they mostly spend time in the classroom, whether full-timers. I see them a lot doing a lot of reassigned time. So really, the ones that are having the most impactful relationship with students are our part-timers. And I always tell everybody that I'm around, how are we changing our systems to better serve the students when we don't have the part-timers that are in the classroom as part of the conversation and the decision-making? So it's really about working with your own local senates. In a way, senates are very, very powerful. They are the voice of the faculty for anything that we do, right? In academic and professional matters. So it's really knocking the door and saying, okay, do we have part-time faculty representation? At my college, as I am the academic senate president, we made sure that each school has a part-time senator, representative sitting at the table at the Senate. And also in our bylaws, we never made a distinction that it had to be a tenure track faculty going for the positions of officer or senator. So that is open. So for the first time in history, I'm very excited to share this. We have elections for the treasurer and the part-time officer, and there is two part-times that are going for both positions. So if it all goes well, for the first time ever, we're gonna have two part-time faculty members as officers in a board of 7, 2 of them non-elected officers at the academic senate. And I think that is unprecedented, because this is where they can now have that position of power to really advocate for part-time rights.
And very briefly, I'll add on to this. I think the full-time and tenured faculty do a disservice to their own departments. If some of your classes are mostly taught by part-timers and students aren't getting that quality that I talked about, I don't think it's a great look in the long run if you're going to be, department chair in 10 years or so. So again, we're the paying customer here, so you got to keep us happy. That's what I first learned when I moved to this country. So I don't know. Those are my 2 cents.
Quickly, if I may ask you to go quickly, John, and then Scott, and then we'll do closing remarks.
Thanks, Debbie. So your question kind of implies that part of the reason or the main reason that we haven't gotten the health benefits negotiated at many locals is because of full-time faculty resistance. And I wanted to say, actually, I think that's not really the main reason. And I want to wag my finger at some of these locals here. I mean, we have negotiated $200 million of ongoing funding to completely reimburse districts for what they spend on part-timer healthcare. Negotiating this at the local level should be like shooting fish in a barrel. If your local has not negotiated this, and that seems to be a majority of the locals, why the hell not? To me, that speaks to two things: the weakness of our local bargaining and the fact that many part-timers are not empowered within their locals and maybe aren't even on the negotiating teams in the first place. And if we can't get this health care at the local level, we have a problem. So that speaks to the weakness of our local organizing. And I totally like the idea of, building up strike power that's been talked about. Great idea. But we're not anywhere near that if we can't even negotiate healthcare that doesn't cost the district a dime. Like, what are we doing at the local level here, folks? If your local hasn't negotiated this, what are you doing right now to change that?
Okay, I have to answer to John there, because I was the lead negotiator negotiating this issue for a part-time only chapter, and we couldn't get it. And what I see is a absolute fear, overly conservative, but nonetheless a fear on the part of the administration. They don't trust that the state is going to follow through with the funding. And so that's another piece to plug in there as part of that problem we have to resolve. But I wanted to address the original question. If you take a piece of bread, a single slice of bread, you put it on the table between three very hungry people, will they always fight over the bread? And the answer is only if they believe there's no more bread to be had. And I think that human history is such, and I think that we band together, we form groups, we have solidarity. I think that if we get past this notion and recognize that, I think that the question about, infighting, which has really been created by those attempting to bust our unions, right? We got to get past this, and we got to say, look, put our heads together and find ways to get more bread. There's plenty of bread out there. Let's get together. Let's join. Let's find the bread we need to get what we need, and stop fighting over it. And I also question whether that fighting is really, as ubiquitous as some of us tend to think or assert that it really is.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to close out the panel, and I had a question for everyone, but if you have something else to say as opposed to answering the question, that's completely fine. Whatever your closing remarks are, and if you could keep them brief. But the question is, if you were to envision the ideal one-tiered California community colleges system, what would your vision look like? So I will call on folks just to make us go quickly. Peter, do you mind if I start with you?
Not at all. It's like I think there's like a famous saying about, all to each, and it's like we need to make sure that all of our colleagues are treated with respect, and that each of us wouldn't mind doing the job of the other. And I think that that's the way, when I see the final product that we fight for through legislation locally, in partnership with all the constituents. I love the point that Anna made about SEIU, right? Our CSEA colleagues, and there's a variety of other folks that we can work with. But I should be on my campus and say, I would love to do that job over there, because they're treated with just as much respect as I feel in my position right now. So that's my end goal. And I know it's generic, but that's how I know it's success. Thanks,
Peter. John, toss it to you.
Wow, that's such a large question. Well, I think we do have a model, the Vancouver model, which, as Frank said, is not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. Probably, one of the best models in the continent for higher ed for our community college systems. So I think that's a good jumping off point. There are a couple of details, like what's the level at which you have to maintain your load to be regularized after a couple of years, and they have 50%. Can we get it to 40%? Can we get the automatic regularization? I think that the Vancouver model is a model, and I think that we can improve upon that, and hopefully 10 years from now, other states will be talking about how to implement the California model.
Greatly appreciate all of our panelists for being here. We're going to move to breakout rooms now. Panelists, if you can stay. Please find a breakout room that is relevant to your interests. If you cannot, we deeply appreciate the time that you took to be with us here today. Thank you, everyone. We're going to come back here around 3:55. Have a great session.